Well, you guessed, my faithful Canon took a dive, so you didn't miss much. I put in the remaining carbon discs, as you can see, on this side right here. And what we're going to do now is put that retaining plate back on. First of all, we have to put this little button connector on. That's going to allow that electrical field to complete. Then we're going to put that retaining plate over it. I would recommend using something like tweezers or something like that, because you can fit it in that space a lot easier to get it back into position. Yeah, I think you can see that right over here. And now we're going to take that retaining plate, and then we're going to have to get that screw back into place as well. Magnetics are great as long as they do it when you want them to do it. So okay, so I'm going to have to angle this up a little bit just so I can get that screw to cooperate. And not to be weird, but one way you can break the electrical field a little bit when you're dealing with a piece of tweezers like this is just to wet the end a little bit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, and right now it's not working. Okay, so I'm going to put that screw back in place to see if we can get that back in place now. Actually, I'm going to do it by hand because I almost lost it there off the table. Try it one more time here. Actually, you know what I'll use is my Leatherman. It's going to have a little bit bigger of a grabbing surface. It's going to be a little bit more stable. Okay, got it in there. Let's see if we can get it screwed back down. It is a tedious process, folks, I won't lie to you. But to allow your machine to work better and to keep your foot controller from overheating, it's well worth the effort. So we did get it back in there just fine. You can see right here is the one that we had taken out. We just put it back in. Now we're going to go ahead and put our spring back in. Obviously you would want to clean the spring as well. Just drop it down into that empty chamber right there in the middle. And there shouldn't be two ways for that to go in, but no, it's the same. And then again, this little butterfly thing, we would want to go ahead and clean that on both sides. There's basically two fins here. There's an inner fin and an outer fin, and we would want to clean both sides of that, okay? So you just slide it back into that space. It's going to be coming through the other side. And you're going to have to kind of contend with that spring loading a little bit. It's going to be fighting you. And next thing we want to do is get that little nut back on. That's going to be our retaining nut for that, okay? And that's a little bit of a bugger to get threaded too. You have to kind of get your fingers in there just in the right way to get that starting to thread on. I've got bigger hands, so those of you that have smaller hands will probably not have to battle this as much as I will. Plus, as your hands get a little bit cold, it doesn't make it much easier, does it? So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to hold it on this end and see if I can begin threading it from the other end instead of trying to thread it from the other end, which is going to be pretty doggone impossible, or at least difficult. Okay, so we got it starting to thread, so now we hopefully will have an easier go of it. I'm going to go ahead and just push these two little fins in and just spin that from this side to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Now you might say, how far are you going to tighten it in? Well, the key with doing this procedure is you don't want to over tighten it so that these fins are recessed too far down. When you're operating the foot control, it's going to be going in and out like this, okay? Which is fine, but if you over tighten the nut on this side, on this bolt, it's going to pull these down too far. And what you could have is you could have a live foot control that, unless you unplug the power source, it could begin to heat up because you're basically completing a circuit, but there's not enough of a depression on this to actuate the motor so that you actually have the motor as a source of drawing that electricity. And those carbon discs are going to start to try to absorb the heat from the circuit being open. But what's going to happen is they're going to start to overheat. So you want to make sure that you don't over tighten this. They should be just about level with the surface of the edge of this. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now we're sliding this little foot control mechanism in, trying to anyway. There we go. So now we have that mechanism in place. This is the mechanism that basically that button on the foot controller is going to push down on to cause that foot controller to operate. Okay? But now we have to try to push this in just far enough that we can put that last piece on. Remember that little piece, that little flange that sticks out? We got to put that last, I'm trying to get my camera shot right here, put this last piece on that's going to thread on there so that we can test this foot controller and see if it still is going to work correctly. And you want to give that about four or so turns, and then if you release the spring, it's going to hold that nicely in place. Okay? Hopefully you can see that. It's going to hold that nicely in place on there. And at this point, if you feel like this is sticking too far out, you can always increase the tension on that. But I think for our purposes, we're going to leave it just the way it is for right now and give it a try. Okay? So now we have to go back to the drawing board of wiring this foot control again to operate. And I'll just show you again in the shot. You can see that was just wiping off like one disc and a little bit of the inner part. So you'll go through a lot of Q-tip swabs doing this process, trust me. Okay, so we've got this set up now. And obviously this wire is going to come over the top. This wire is going to come over the top. Where are we? It's going to come over the top before you were to potentially put the cover back on. And obviously, you know, you'll have the button. The button just slides. Well, it slides in one way and it doesn't slide in the other. There we go. So you just slide it in like this, and then you would put it back together and you're good to go. But first of all, we have to wire it and make sure that we still have a working foot control after we took all of those pieces and parts off, right? So let's bring the motor over first of all, and I'll have to change my shot again, obviously. We don't have as much wiring to do this time because we've already connected a couple of the wires and we didn't take them off when we went through this process. So we have our power source, and now we have two leads coming off of this foot control. And at this point it's pretty easy for us because we know that one of those leads for the foot controller is going to connect to which zone. If you said zone 2, you're correct. And zone 2 is also going to have a motor connector. So we know it's going to be this one right here. This is going to be our zone 2. And when we're down to 2 wires, I get it. Scott, don't patronize us. We're not electronic wizards, and we're not electrical engineers, but when we're down to 2 wires, we got a 50-50 chance or better. And you're right. You're absolutely right. So I'm going to move that up just a hair. There we go. Okay, and we've got our other foot control wire, and that's going to connect to zone 3, which also goes with a power source. And we know this is our power source, so we're going to connect those two and use our wire nut to tie those off as well. So now we're back to 3 zones again, right? On zone 1 we have power and motor. So power and motor would be zone 1 right here, power and motor. On zone 2 we have foot control and motor. That would be this one right here. Can you see that? Yeah. And then finally on zone 3 we have foot control and power, which is going to be, which one is it? This one right here. That's our power and that's our foot control. So that's going to be zone 3. All right? So all that blobby blah blah blah. Now we have to see if we broke something or if we went through that procedure of taking those carbon discs out, putting it back together, having my camera quit. Oh, gosh. And now we're going to see if we actually have an operating foot control and motor. And I'm going to bring that motor down a little bit because it looks like we're way off screen, doesn't it? Well, let's try that again. There we go. Yep, you can see it. Okay. So now I'm plugging the power source in. You can see white is the extension cord in this. We're going to test the power just to see if we are carrying an electrical charge. Again, we can use one of 2 methods. We can use something like this to do it. And we are. Or we can use something like this and do it as well. And I'll rotate this a little bit because you're not going to be able to see that probably in the camera otherwise. Okay, so we definitely have power. So we've connected all of our zones. We don't have any wires touching. We have power. Now we'll see if that motor fires up. And then we know that we did the procedure correctly and that our foot control is not only still operating, but if we went through all of those discs and gently swabbed them with a Q-tip and then cleaned those chambers and cleaned all those copper contacts, that we would have a very, very well-running foot control, and also it would not have a tendency to overheat. Even if you used it a lot, it would run a lot cooler because that carbon dust that you saw on the white piece of buckram that I used would all be cleaned off of those discs. Okay? All right. Let's see what happens. Whoa, that's got some kick, doesn't it? All right, so I'm going to disconnect my power. We are successful. So what we've just done is looked at the anatomy of a foot control from a totally different level. I mean, I've shown you little blips of this or talked about that as far as trying to make your foot control function better in concert with your motor. But this is going way, way, way deep. And I hadn't seen anyone else on the internet that specifically had shown this on video. I saw some still shots of someone trying to take apart a Bakelite foot controller like this and showing some of those little carbon discs. But now you've actually seen it on video. Between these two video segments, I'm probably going to be forced to buy a new camera. I hate that idea because this Canon that I'm using, I've used since I started on YouTube many, many, many years ago. So you know what I mean. You get something that's comfortable, you get something that's familiar, and you don't want to have to change away from it. But, oh well, it is what it is, right? So I hope this has been helpful to you. Because of the use of electricity and the wiring and everything else, if you decide to try this yourself, use extreme caution. And if you're not comfortable doing it, don't do it. So that's my quick little disclaimer as far as this process, that there is an element of danger involved with it. But hopefully at least the content of it is helpful and you feel better equipped now to maintain that foot controller and to work with me in dispelling the myth that electric foot controllers are a firebomb, a fire trap, and that, you know, at any moment they're going to burst into flames. We have to give maintenance to anything. Our machines, our foot controller, our motors, our cars, anything else mechanical that we use in our lives. So now you are better equipped to know how to go in deep and go into the anatomy of that foot controller and really, really optimize it, make it run well for you, and make it run safe for you as well. So thanks for watching both of these premieres, and you stay safe out there. Good sewing. God bless.